Hey guys, so as promised, this is my September end of summer garden update video. So as I keep referencing, we'll do an update on some of the garden beds that we established this summer, as well as some of the Plant Something Sunday plants and see how they're doing. And I figure why not start where I started my first video, with the area that was inspired by covering up the well pump head eventually. As you can remember, I tilled this area rather thoroughly, and then it was a couple layers of cardboard as well as a pretty thick layer of mulch, and everything seems to be doing really well. The little ornamental arborvitae has put on maybe a half an inch of growth just since planting it, and I want to say that this Green Mountain boxwood has bounced back a little bit from the stress of being in the can for a while. The Newport plum that I have back here is doing well. It's put on a couple new shoots. The ostrich ferns, as you can see in the background, are sort of done for the year. They don't transplant well. They do a really good job at storing what they need relatively quick in the growing season from my experience. So they're really bad at transplanting, but being still lively throughout the rest of the growing season, but they're great at bouncing back with new shoots next year. So the back of this bed will look much better come springtime. My lemony lace elderberry seems to be liking the suppression of the weeds much more. I feel like it's put on maybe about a foot of growth since that video a couple of months ago. And as far as like the weeded area around, my little perimeter has worked relatively well. They're starting to encroach back here, which I think you can see, and that's something I'm gonna have to take care of in my fall cleanup. So I'm just going to pick up and move the camera around the property. So I don't know if you remember, but this is the hillside garden bed where it's going to be a work in progress and slowly add things one at a time. It's got the tricky light situation, which you can sort of see in place right now. And I have the golden rain tree that's here and the arborvitaes. I will say something that's unique to me is I could plant 2 or 12 arborvitaes at any one time. And every grouping that I plant, I always have one that does not make it. It could be on the same water source, it could be watered the same amount, and I just always don't have the luck of having all of them make it, and I don't know why that is. But if you can remember from a couple weeks ago, this rain tree was having quite a bit of stress being in its growing can, and it's rebounded quite nicely. It's added actually a couple new shoots and new leaves, and then it still has some of its damage, but it is relatively well for being about a month in the ground. And then something that I did not talk about are these unnamed plants, and they are blueberry, if you can believe it or not. And if you remember in that video, there was a ton of weeds that were both cut off and then smothered down, and just by taking away the competition, these have been here for 2 years, and just in the last 2 months, I don't even know, this is roughly 1.5 foot of new growth and all these new branches. But this one seems to have filled out the most dramatic impression. So I'm really excited to see how these come back in the spring after they've been given a little bit more time. This is a garden bed that we did not talk about this summer, but it's something that I'm really proud of. And it's a little post-season, and I'm doing my garden tour today without doing any cleanup, because fall cleanup for me is maybe about a week away. So you'll get to see what it just sort of looks like on any given day towards the end of the summer. I've got some of the early leaves falling down. I do have some weeds I have to pull. These obviously have to be cut back. But this is one of the first garden beds that inspired me to work more in the yard, that I have found a whole lot of benefit and peace by getting lost in these projects. Plus, as these start to grow in, I have a purple smoke bush here, and there's an arborvitae, and then there's some hydrangeas that this was their first year for, but in probably 2 years, they'll be about up here. Hold on. It'll help surround the campfire pit that's back there, and I keep talking about creating an outdoor living space where there's a little bit of privacy, so it feels like its own section of thing. You can see some of the logs that come from that fallen tree that I broke up a couple days ago, and that's enough campfire wood to have us enjoy this outside space in the meantime. But I figure I'd show this garden bed what it looks like now before winter cleanup. Obviously, as I get the hang of doing this, there will be a spring tour of what this looks like when things come up, and maybe its peak of summer, I'll get to share this. The other factor with the leaves is there is this giant maple tree right here that spits its leaves out relatively early in the season, and they go everywhere. So that's fun. So we're here with one of our trees from Plant Something Sunday, which is the tricolor beech tree. And there was a little bit of a transplant shock with this. So I've kept up on watering, and some of the leaves fell off and they've rebudded a little bit without coming out. And the leaves that were a little bit closer to the center of the trunk have rebounded just fine. To be honest, I'm a little bit worried about them holding on to enough water to maintain these early buds throughout the winter. It's quite possible that I have this much dieback, and that's just part of the game. You win some, you lose some with transplanting trees. And then behind it, let's see if I can get a close-up. All right, so I'm going to scooch behind it. This is the variegated willow that we planted, I think, the Sunday after the beach, and it also had some stress, but with the water that's being brought to this area for the tree, this has really benefited. Quite honestly, I have a working theory that this willow bush is probably sucking up and dominating the water from the beech tree, which is why I have some of the tips seem like they're dying back. Again, it's a working theory. I'll find out come spring if that's actually valid. Oh, but just by planting this, I have about another 12 inches of growth just in a month. So this spot seems to be doing really well for it, and I'm really enjoying the white and green foliage from this. And then this, again, also post-season, and it doesn't do it justice, but I love barberry bushes. Even the sterile varieties are prolific with these little berries, or, well, the seeds. And I just think they're so pretty because they add a touch of, winter interest if they're still around by then. But this particular variety and the orange rocket has really taken off this year. It's probably grown about 2 feet this year for its second growing season. And it's its first with the berries, so I'm really excited about seeing those. And then right next to it, we have sedum that's in bloom right now. It's the end of the day, but, well, actually you can see it right here. Our honeybees are all over them recently. It's a little bit more intense in the middle of the day. So let's move on to the bed that's right behind it. Now, as Prudence might be showing you, as you can see on the right side, I wanted to show you a bigger impact on how well this cardboard method works for me and why I find it to be absolutely low stress and pretty easy going. On the right of the little rock line it's the same amount of time. I have not touched this area, have not weed whacked it or mowed it or turned anything over in the soil. But I mean, some of these plants are pushing 3 feet tall. And then if we just move right over here to where I put down my cardboard and mulch method, I haven't weeded this area at all. The only thing I have done to change it is I have put in this little spotlight that features this Cleveland pear I put here. I know a lot of people talk a lot of crap about Cleveland pears, but I love them. They're great for my pollinators. They're pretty fast growing tree with very simple classic beauty to them. This is its 2nd year in this location. I already have berries that the birds are picking from, and I enjoy it. And then the other thing that I've changed since filming reclaiming this area is I put in green echinacea, which is, or as I sometimes call it, echidnia. I already know that is not how you pronounce it. They fade out to, they start with these like lime green petals, and then they fade out to sort of like an off-white. And I know I talk a lot about purple foliage, and I talk about my yellows and oranges in the leaf season, but I love green flowering plants. I find them to be they're like unexpected little finds in the garden, because they get almost tucked away with the green of most leaf structures. And it's like this little secret that unless you know you're looking for these green flowers, most people overlook them. So I don't know, it speaks to me. Over here is where I put in that little run of English lavender. This is the first year where I cut back my lavender halfway through, and let me tell you how stressful that was, thinking I have just ruined my lavender. I am going to have to replace these. They aren't going to come back, but they did, which my honeybees really appreciated, and the bumblebees. They were all over them for round 2 of reblooming. And we're just winding down from actually round 2, so I'm going to have to cut them back with the fall cleanup in a week so I can repeat the same thing. It was a very nerve-wracking learning experience, right? You do something and then you wait patiently for 2 weeks to find out if what you did was bad, or if what you did was actually the right thing. Oh, right. So I left this area untouched, but that doesn't mean it didn't come 100% guaranteed on effectively suppressing weeds. Let me show you 2 areas where some have popped up. All right, so I have a weed here, I have a weed here, I have one sort of resurfacing over here, and then these are seedlings from a tree. But if you can remember, there were a ton of these little trees coming up all over this area that we had to come in and cut down. So these are all pretty tender, and again, I've left them just to show you the effectiveness of my cardboard method. What I personally think happened is that this was an area where I didn't overlap enough layers, so it didn't thoroughly suppress everything. But again, just showing the benefits of suppressing weeds in this area, this arborvitae has probably put on, I would say, a healthy 6 inches of growth. You can see the beautiful gold tipped leaves here that weren't here, just a month ago. I'm looking forward to these growing in. I'm looking forward, I might put a little fairy light string on these. There's another one over here, a false cypress, but I don't know, we'll see. In a couple growing seasons, I'm looking forward to putting on a standard string of lights on these 2 trees. Now this is an area of the front porch that is sort of similar to the garden bed that we just looked at, which is actually right next to it. This is relatively neglected, and I'm going to be reclaiming, hold on. I'm going to be reclaiming it a little bit for fall, and I forget what this is. I remember picking it up, and it was rated to a grow zone 6. And this was 2 or 3 years ago at this point, and I'm a grow zone 5, but I like to experiment with 6 just because. And it does really well, as you can see. It's taken over. I think this is larger than I was expecting it to, And with it being so well, I'm of course going to push my luck, and I need to move it back, right? It's taking over this area up here where I want to put in more mums and some garden sage and a couple more plants that are evergreen, because again, this is our front porch. I want there to always look like there's a lot of present garden surrounding our spaces. And so I'm gonna move this probably sometime this fall. But there's these like butter yellow coreopsis that I just absolutely adore. They came back very strong. I wasn't expecting them to come back either. So something is working really well up here, because we had a super frigid winter last year, and I've got some things that are thriving. So I'm gonna move you up. So now we're gonna walk up to the hydrangea hedge. So nothing terribly exciting, other than the amount of growth these have put on. Again, we are at post-peak season for them, and for the most part, except for this middle section, they have just really filled in. This is only their second year in the ground, and I am just so tickled by how much growth that these have put on since Caleb and I put them in the ground. And then you can't tell, well, maybe you can. Right here is where we're going. It's where my hosta garden is. All right, wait. So I have to hack down this bush for fall cleanup, but hidden in it is a flowering crab apple. Look at those berries. Again, this is, a lot of these plants, this is their second year, and they are doing so well. So I'm just gonna point and move about, and this is the hosta garden. It's a pretty shady area over here because there is a huge sycamore tree right here, which I love, and my goodness, does it give a lot of leaves to clean up. But my hostas seem to love it, and I think some of the leaf mulch helps with making them thrive so much. And they line our driveway. I'm going to take a couple more divisions next year and fill some of these holes in. But I wanted to get this done too, because we are at an unknown factor of when our first frost date will be, and these are one of the first that go. So I am not a tall individual, so I'm not quite sure how much you can see of these, but this is the Newport plum that we planted last Sunday, I believe. And it's already establishing well in this new space. What I was looking back on that you could not see was, well, really the tree itself, and then two, that a lot of the leaves were wilted. Again, container stress, put things in the ground as soon as possible, don't dawdle. And they've already bounced back. It got a healthy dose of rain that night. It also rained somewhat recently, and then supplemental watering, and I will say there are some healthy leaves on here. So I will be looking forward to how this gets through the winter. Now let's move over to the garden bed that is unexpectedly coming together one plant at a time. I know that this is in the background of a lot of my shots in this space. This is what will be our little vineyard space, and I am letting it just get out of hand for the sense that I'm going to cut down a lot of these things for nitrogen in the soil, but also this is where I took advantage of putting together a sunflower and zinnia flower field plot for Caleb. His favorite flowers are sunflowers, and throughout the property this year I have planted, I think, 2,000, and they are just now starting to bloom. I think what a lot of people don't realize that in my area is that you can get away with planting zinnias late in the season, as well as sunflowers. Well, those are black-eyed Susans, but a lot of these are just about to open up, and I will probably get another month's worth of blooms. And when you think about things that bloom for pollinators' benefit in late season, that actually have nectar and pollen, these are some things to think about. They're underrated. So do your sunflower and zinnia sowing in early August for a late September, early October show. Oh, and I also have some birdhouse gourds that are coming in. I'm excited. We are in the space that we tend to work a lot on Sundays. And as you can see, the slender Hanaki cypress is doing well. It's actually put on a couple new shoots that you can barely tell right now. And the cold hardy mimosa is just starting to show that it is slowing down for the season. The vigala is, I know I'm pronouncing that wrong, is doing really well. And then I have a couple things planned out for some upcoming Sundays. And then behind me, in fact, I'll just show you. So as you remember, the heucheras that we planted are doing really well. The lilies are still soaking in their energy for next year. But my goodness, if that's not a warning sign for a spring to come of how this cold hardy mimosa is going to do, I don't know what is. I'm gonna say I'm not going to look forward to it blooming out next year. But until the other night when it hit, I don't know, 38, it was just jamming along. If anything that does look hopeful is the leader still seems to be in a healthy condition. So, you know, again, maybe it's just the leaves. They're so sensitive that maybe they're just the first to go, last to arrive in the spring. We'll see. All right, so behind me, I have these butterfly bushes, which I think I'm going to back up a little bit. And then this is the snow flowering crab apple. As you remember, it had a ton of yellowing, and those yellow leaves fell off. And there's a little bit of damage just from, again, the stress of the summer, but it's still got a pretty good bounce. I'm really excited for this to see how it takes off next year. While I'm over here, this is an area that's going to be tackled next year. I'm excited for this. These are the carnival heucheras that we planted. They have absolutely loved this space. They have pushed out a whole bunch of new growth just in the last 2 weeks in particular, which at this time of year I'm expecting things to slow down, not keep speeding up. So something is working well here, and even the hibiscus behind it has benefited from this area in just being controlled a little bit with moisture and protection of the soil, and, well, helping to avoid competition with resources. There is still a ton of blooms yet to go. But again, that's the benefit of hibiscus, is they look like a whole bunch of sticks throughout the spring, and then they finally leaf out in summer, but they put on a show at the early part of fall. And then a couple paces down, we have the summer crisp pear tree that we planted. And it is actually doing really well. It looks really pathetic at the moment, but there are some healthy growths here. And in fact, some of these woody growths are new to this plant since planting. But as I mentioned, our temperatures dipped the other night, and this already had leaves that were jonesing to go. So they went. Right next to it, again, hibiscus. I forget what variety this is, but they are putting on a very pretty pink show. And then, as I know some of you follow, we put this pathway in, windy and turny, and as some of these things grow in, it'll create a sense of what's around the bend, or what's around the river bend. I'm not gonna sing. I'll save your ears from bleeding. But also, I referenced the apiary behind me, and it looks a little pathetic right now because I started tinkering around with it today. And I don't know what I'm going to do, but that post in the back, I think is what I think what is going to inspire me to prep this for winter. I normally put these down and then I run a tarp to keep a lot of the melting snow off from seeping in, but with the winds last winter and how cold it got, that was not an effective method. So what I think I'm going to do is put up these poles as structures and then maybe even get some number 4 fencing or cage wire and wrap it. I'm not quite sure. It's a thought still in progress, but it would also help to protect me from bears that always plague this area in the springtime. So instead of knocking out some of these walls, which are not permanent, if I run a post through them, it will make that a little bit more difficult. I think I'm going to end it right here in our vegetable bed. Hold on, I have my stalker that's arriving. Again, cold temperatures, and I'm not quite sure, but the summer squash, I'm going to take the last 2 plants that are on it. It's time to let this plant permanently wind down. And I already have some sprouts coming up for lettuces and kales and Swiss chard I'm really excited for. I have the last of my jalapenos, which this is the season, this is the time of year to start picking those. We have our our autumn day harvest coming up. And then the Boston cucumbers are done. I still have a ton of tomatoes. Still not a yellow pear tomato, but I hope that I will get one before the end of the growing season. As long as we don't get down to an actual frost, it could be possible. It could be possible. I have to start my garlic. This is going to be my first year planting hardneck. A hardneck variety I'm really excited for. And then I'm letting some of my beans go so I can get my seeds for next year. I have my Bennington squash, which I'm going to show you. I have a ton of them. I'm about to harvest those on our fall harvest day as well and see what I come up with those. So I'm really excited for that. Our peanuts are ready to go. Excited for that. But I think what I'm most excited about is I have a second ear of corn. I am so thrilled by it. I have no idea if there's actually kernels on it just yet, but the corn is still doing its thing and I'm just gonna keep letting it go. And I'm gonna show you the second ear. So I know everyone's excited about my corn update. Oh, and then I have sweet peas that have just emerged. I had an afterthought to plant them the other day and they've already sprouted. But, oh, and then I'm not going to take you over there, but my winter squash garden is coming along. It's probably 2 weeks behind where I should have transplanted it. Oh well, but I do have some squash varieties coming in. We'll see what I get from that in maybe a month. I have to harvest my potatoes and yes, so let me show you the corn. So we're all aware of Corn Update 2020 with this original ear of corn, right? Looks super pathetic. But again, I'll be excited for one kernel. But adjacent to where it is this ear. Again, not super impressive, but I am so thrilled at how this looks. And as you can see, a month has gone by. I have put on maybe a 1/4 inch of growth for these corn plants here. I don't have a whole lot of, they're not even going to be decoration for this year, but I feel confident that I have enough stalks to do 2 posts on the porch. All right, as you can see, I also have to pull out my red onion. I'm gonna pickle them to see how they turn out. But I'm gonna end it here. This was my first update garden tour video. It was a little bumpy, lots of cuts from place to place, long-winded, but that's what garden tours are. They're people talking and sharing stuff about their gardens and what they're excited about. And I have that pepper I still have to pick. But anyway, I'm glad you took the time to watch to see what I was up to in my space. Let me know what you're doing in your garden spaces. Remember to continue to grow from where you're planted, and I'll share more with you soon. Tschüss!